like she's going to have a big thing put in. So.
Oh,
okay. How old is she?
She's like 93.
My mom, I've got a mom who's 94 who's very close to the end, and it's get that age. My dad lived to be 93. It's hard to see them deteriorate. You know, that's the price you pay for them.
Definitely gets my mom on pins and needles, and my grandpa actually is fortunate to still have him alive at 95. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is great. Yeah, I feel very blessed. My parents have been around a long time. That's, I was telling Edward, it's just really tough. My mom could go at any time right now. She's in a good spot, no pain, but it's just hard. My sister's doing most of the grunt work, so.
Well, I'll tell you what, if it's okay, because I know time's kind
of let's go.
Sure. Go ahead. We'll do our 2-minute. We do a 2-minute real quick interview, or not interview, but introduction. So stay with us, and I'll save the file, and then we'll reintroduce you. Okay, here we go. Welcome. You're listening to Sports Econ 101, the show where we discuss sports topics from a business perspective. I'm your host, Edward Brown, along with my co-host, Bruce McGowan, longtime sports radio personality. Now, today's show is going to be really cool because we have a special guest who specializes in sports stars relocation. In fact, that's the name of his company. It's sportstarrelocation.com. His name is Sean Spanek, and we're going to be blessed to have him on the next segment, and he's going to talk about what it's like to represent athletes when they have to relocate, because
that happens a lot.
Yeah, I mean, not only just between teams, but just like coming, let's say, right out of college.
Well, free agency, trades, everything.
The whole gamut. Yeah. So we're going to have him on the next segment, and in each commercial break, we're going to ask a sports trivia theme is 1980s World Series. Figured we'd get our last-minute World Series in before start back to football again.
Covered a few of those, 1981, 88. Unfortunately, the 2 World Series I covered, actually 3, but 2 of the 3 were Dodger wins. And I'm not a Dodger fan.
Well, then were you happy the Astros won?
Nah, not really. I was rooting for the Dodgers.
You know what's funny? So was I, even though I like Altuve. And
I just thought the Dodgers would wait too long. Of course, the Astros had never won it ever. So, hey.
Ever since the
Colts of 1962, Colt 45s.
Colt 45s. That's it. Okay. Today, let's see. I'm sorry. This segment of Sports Econ 101 is sponsored by Pacific Private Money, providing mortgage investments that are still currently yielding over 7.5% secured by real estate, mostly in the San Francisco Bay Area. Very conservative loan to values, and it doesn't get any more conservative than that. You got to check them out at pacificprivatemoney.com. You can listen to Sports Econ 101 on Sports Byline USA, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and hundreds of stations across the country.
They won't be for a while on Armed Forces Radio too.
We're still on Armed Forces. That's why we have hard breaks, which means we're going to have to go to a break right now.
Those military guys want you out at a certain time.
That's right. Very specific. Yes, okay, you're listening to Sports Econ 101. Don't touch that dial. When we come back, we're going to have Sean Spanek on the line. All right, so let me just gonna save this quick file, and then we'll reintroduce you. Okay.
So where do you live, Sean?
I'm in the Willow Glen area.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty good.
Okay.
Around the area, depending on what sports we're talking about, so it works out pretty well.
Every time I drive down and cover the 49ers, which unfortunately I've had to do a lot this year, I'm just astonished at the amount of growth. I mean, I used to cover the Niners regularly from 81 to 94 during their glory years, so I was going down to, they used to have their facilities in Woodside, on Woodside Road, and then they moved down to Santa Clara. But, back in those days, it was traffic and crowd. Now it's just, I feel like I'm in a different planet.
Yeah.
It's just amazing, yeah.
Okay, you guys ready? Here we go.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Again, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. Now, we have a special guest on the line, Sean Spanek from sportstarrelocation.com. Sean, welcome to Sports Econ 101.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. So, first of all, what is sportstarrelocation.com, and how did you get into it?
Well, Sportstar Relocation, the company set up to assist athletes from the 4 Major League Sports guys with all of their relocation in every Major League to be nationwide. So when athletes are drafted or traded, we got guys beginning seasons or ending seasons like we just had for baseball. We basically have a network set up nationwide to help with all the above. I mean, from soup to nuts, a player or family needs help with their rental or purchasing a home or selling a home or location, car transport, household good move, all the above. That's kind of the beauty of the way that the network was set up naturally to make that whole process seamless.
And how did you get into it?
I run my own independent boutique style firm called Spanek Real Estate down here in the South Bay. And back around 2006, 2007, I had attended a real estate conference in San Diego that was being hosted by a very well-known real estate trainer named Mike Berry. I had heard about this gentleman named Ed Kaminsky, who was kind of one of Mike Berry's show ponies up on stage, if you will. One of the top producers in the country, who I'd heard through the grapevine was about to try to take his sports star relocation brand that he had started in the late 90s, specifically in the LA market. He was looking to grow it out nationally. The timing was perfect. I was introduced to Ed. We hit it off. I gave him my sports background, and he said, yeah, I'm actually there. It's absolutely going to be a big market for us because of 6 major league teams there currently. And I've got another partner down in Arizona named Ted Peterson, and really looking for some support and help to put a network together. Realtors, we were looking ideally for realtors and brokers in these major markets that were athlete savvy, if you will.
Okay.
What I mean by that is basically just really knowing the communities in relation to the practice facilities and the stadiums that these players and their families should consider. Because the thing we pretty much see for the 4 major league sports is that athletes typically don't want to be farther out than a half hour from their facility.
Like with that, huh?
Yeah. So, you take Levi Stadium, for example, and you're starting to see this with most of the league, the NFL. Most of the practice facilities back right up to the stadium these days for the players in their lives. So if you look at a 49ers player, those that are familiar with like the Silver Creek Country Club or the Rivermark community in Santa Clara, minutes away from their facility, and then you start to get into the more high prestigious single-family home neighborhoods of your Los Gatos, Saratogas, and your Willow Glens, where a lot of the Sharks and Niner players and those sort of guys like to reside. But we network at a lot of different levels. We're very embedded in with the teams, their sports agents, their wealth advisors. We have a lot of movement and activity that happens amongst our network. The beauty of it is that as a player moves from point A to point B, if I have a player leaving my market and he gets picked up by the Dallas Cowboys, for example, I don't even have to think. It's a real simple handoff to allow that boots on the ground realtor in my network to execute on their end.
Hey, back up for just a minute. You said your sports background. What is that?
I was fortunate coming out of high school. I decided to pursue football, and I played a couple years at Foothill College as a wide receiver. And then at the time, was making the leap from Foothill to Chico State back when they had a football program. I actually had found myself in a pretty interesting situation. I was taking a speech class at Foothill. This is right after completing my second year of football. I knew I was going to be committing to Chico State and was looking to take my off-season regimen to the next level. And believe it or not, I had a gal in my speech class at Foothill who said, John, you should come into my gym, Powerhouse Gym in Redwood City this week if you have a chance. I've got a lot of the 49er guys in there that are in there pretty much every morning. Jerry Rice, Dana Stubblefield, Sean Dawkins, as we know, the longtime trainer for Jerry Rice. And it was a very kind of a quiet group that was in there very early in the morning. They would typically train at Menlo College or Stanford's fields for the kind of on-field. We all know the hill workout that Jerry and his group would put in that grind in the offseason they would put himself through. So I really, that very next morning, I didn't hesitate. I woke up early in the morning, went in the Powerhouse Gym, and the first guy I see on there is Richie Waters spotting Jerry Rice on the bench press. And I kind of worked my way around, got kind of a day pass in the gym, and kind of met some of the different guys. And Dana Stubblefield actually was kind of the one who knew what I was trying to do to take my off-season regimen to the next level, and into 3 consecutive years of working out with those guys in the off-season. So it's kind of neat to have on the back end now, and my working career to have sports built into my real estate career.
What a fascinating career that you've developed here, and I'm curious. We're talking to Sean Spanek, who is located here in the Bay Area, but you deal with athletes nationwide. I'm curious. The big challenge of bringing somebody here to the Bay Area is finding not affordable housing, because athletes are making good money. They can afford whatever they want, but they don't want to spend a ton of money. Is it more of a challenge here than just about any place, with the exception of maybe New York or Chicago?
Yeah, you're absolutely hitting on the head. It is a lot of sticker shock, especially for these young kids that you see they're coming out of these Midwestern southern markets, and they're coming into, I mean, they're not familiar with the Bay Area. There's a lot of people that are here, and just trying to find really that market where you can get the best bang for your buck. Those that have the wealth advisor, a good wealth advisor voice in their life, we find that the tendency for a lot of these guys coming into the area is to rent in the very beginning. We even advise them to rent. We're not trying to sell anybody a piece of real estate necessarily right away. Get them comfortable with their surroundings, and then down the road, playing contract in return of how much money we're talking about, if it really makes financial sense for them. There's a few factors that kind of play into it too. I mean, how much time do they even want to spend in the Bay Area once the playing season's over? If you look at a guy like Michael Crabtree, for example, who came in with years when he came into the league and started with the Niners, still to this day, that's a player who has never owned real estate here in the Bay Area, but yet he owns back in Texas, tax-friendly state, and owning back there. So you do see quite a bit of that as well. And since we're everywhere, we're able to help guys like that.
So a guy like that who definitely plays for the Raiders, so again, another Bay Area team. Where does he stay during the week in general?
Yeah, so it really differs case by case. Some guys want to go out of the deck 2 seconds from the practice facility. In which case, we're talking about Oakland for a Raiders player, that Bay Farm community is 2 seconds to the facility/airport, and just in that general vicinity, guys would want to reside there. And then you have others that want to maybe move out to your Lafayette, your Walnut Creeks. Your San Ramon has been, in Dublin has been a big area across 580 there for a lot of the Raiders guys.
But what I mean is do they apartment? They stay in a hotel. I mean, a hotel get a little expensive, and you can't really spread out personally.
Yeah, if it's a rental, which a lot of the time it is in the beginning, it'll be a rental that's just run with a 6 to 12-month term, just to take care of their needs for the season. You have some players that are going to know they're going to be here for a while, or others with raising families. For example, a lot of the San Jose Sharks guys over the years, I take your Patrick Marlowe's, your Joe Thornton's, your guys like that. They've built some monstrosity homes where they've actually done from the ground up. They know their kids and their families are going to be here for long term, and that area is now their full-time home.
Before we take a break, I wanted to sort of segue to that. You mentioned the family aspect. I mean, so many of these young athletes, even in the mid-20s, late 20s, have a wife, have a couple of kids. I mean, that complicates the whole situation, and it makes it a little more difficult, I think, a little more challenging for you.
Yeah, and when we get back,
let's ask him about that.
We're going to have Sean
talk about that a little bit more.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
You get kind of a good line example.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right, so here's our first commercial break trivia question. Again, we're talking 1980s World Series. And Sean, if you know the answer, don't say anything until we get back. One time we had a guest answer the question before.
Bullard in Dallas.
Yeah.
I've been known to do that myself.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
All right, here's our first question. Who became the first player ever to have multiple home runs in a World Series twice? That's our question.
It's a good one.
All right. When we come back, if you don't know the answer, I'll give you a hint, and then
you're going to have to give me a hint. Even though I covered a lot of the 1980s.
Okay. Here's your hint.
I'm drawing a blank.
It was in the year 1980.
Ah, there we go. Okay.
So that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
Don't touch that dial. Sports Econ 101. I'll be right back. All right. That was a good first segment. Let me just save this file, and we'll get back to our question there.
You grew up in the South Bay, or are you from another part of the Bay Area?
Yeah, born and raised in the South Bay, and then I took a left turn around 2000 in the sports retail licensing industry down in San Diego for about 6 years, and then got back into real estate full time in 2006.
Did well for yourself, and you got a good vision and a good plan, which so many of us today, we sort of. I mean, I've been in broadcasting for 41 years. I've been like the classic journeyman. I've bounced around little jobs. But if you have a plan and you have a vision, it's good to kind of, follow up on it. It sounds like you've done really well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's definitely an niche that attracts a lot of attention. One that
Absolutely. It's definitely needed.
Fascinating career.
Okay, here we go, guys. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. One more time. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. Our special guest, Sean Spanek, is on the phone. We're going to go to our first trivia question. Who became the first player ever to have multiple home run games in a World Series twice?
In the 1980s.
Yes, in the 1980s.
I'm going to let Sean take a stab at it, but you mentioned the hit was 1980, and the 1980 World Series was, of course, the Phillies' first championship. They beat the Royals, so it had to be Philadelphia Phillies of 1980 or the Kansas City Royals.
That is correct.
Yeah, I just have to figure out which guy. You want to take a stab at it, Sean? I'm sitting here,
You have 50 guys to choose from, right?
Yeah, that's right. Anybody you think might be there? I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, no idea, Mike.
Yeah,
it's funny because you think of a speed rather than a run hitter.
Okay,
Willie
Wilson?
Oh, Willie Aikens.
Willie Mays Aikens.
Is that what his name?
Willie Mays Aikens.
Willie Mays Aikens.
Yeah, he always liked to be referred to as Willie Mays Aikens.
Yeah.
The Kansas City team was great. Frank White and George Brett and Paul Splittorff and Dan Quisenberry. Yeah, remember Dan Quisenberry had a brief run with the Giants before he tragically died, I think, of cancer.
Yeah,
he was only about 45. He just out of the game. Anyway, I digress. But we were talking to Sean a little bit about relocation, and then that's your specialty, getting the athletes to different markets and getting them in a comfortable situation. And we were alluding to the fact that you bring along most athletes, not all, but many, in their mid-20s even, bring along a family, bring along a wife, a child, 2 kids, maybe even a mom or a dad. How does that complicate the challenge of relocating these athletes to different markets?
You have schools to think about.
Absolutely. And we have all that stuff unlocked. I mean, the school part of it, you can imagine. I'll give you a live example, not to name drop, but I think I'm comfortable using this example because it's recent. We're actually, our group, and I call this kind of a sports star group, if you will. We know that Eric Bledsoe from the Phoenix Suns was just relocated to Milwaukee Bucks, and that's something where NBA and these trades that happen, whether it's the beginning of the season or mid-season, they happen at light speed. And within 24 to 48 hours, players have to get interested. The player has to go and have to basically wave the kids goodbye and say, hey, I'm going to have to catch up to you. And the wife is left with a lot of these things in this structure has to handle on the back end. So basically, first phone call I make is really to worry about Eric with a rental for the balance of the season. So I'm on the phone with my rep in Milwaukee, someone who deals a lot with the NBA team there, the Brewers, etc. He has to go work on finding a house situation that will accommodate the family. We don't know always right away if move, depending on the age of the kids right away, or if it's something that's going to kind of happen maybe a little bit later in the season, again depending on age. And then on the back end, I made my next phone call my rep in Arizona, Ted Peterson, who deals with all the Arizona-based sports teams, and kind of see, okay, so what's going on here? Are there cars that need to be moved? What kind of furniture needs to be moved up? Is there a house that potentially needs to be sold, which it looks like there would be? And I really, again, you guys, we just leave it to the local experts in the market to handle all that. So I kind of start at the front end. I pass a lot of it off to the back end and them to execute and just basically address the needs. And again, with us being in these different markets, it's very easy for us to execute with our vendors and get them situated because of how we're set up nationally.
It's interesting you mentioned Bledsoe. I work at night on a local station doing the sports updates, and that was a sudden move. Precipitated by the firing of the coach. Bledsoe wasn't happy. He tweeted he wanted out there, and within 24 hours they accommodated him. But it did, as you mentioned, it did happen so suddenly that I would think would make it even more of a challenge. Whereas, if you have a couple of weeks, it's the end of the season, a guy signs a free agent contract, he's thinking about it, it's not all going to have to come together right away. So this is this must, for his family, if he's getting wife and kids, a real source of stress, I think.
Yeah, and guys, it's just as well working with.
Sure.
We're the first phone call for his wealth firm. I'm sure the opportunity came from this particular player. And they know that Sports Star Relocation handles this nationally, that it's with one phone call, they just basically lay out all the various needs that him and his family has, and we're able to knock it down one by one.
Yeah, I could just see, it's funny, for us who aren't on the front lines, we don't really think about it that much. Oh, okay, guy gets traded. Okay, well, he gets traded, But all the stuff that you're talking about, this behind-the-scenes stuff, I can just imagine all the stress that goes on. And for these athletes and their wives, if they just have to make one call and get all the various aspects taken care of.
Well, he was talking about Joe Thornton, and I think you mentioned Patrick Marleau, who was with the Sharks for 19 years. Now he's back up in his native Canada playing in Toronto, where he's finishing off his career. I'm not sure if he's moved up there permanently. I get the feeling that he probably is one of those guys who has properties in both countries. But I mean, if you've got a guy who's been a part of an organization or a community for many, many years, and suddenly, they're either cut loose or they decide at the end of their career, like a Frank Thomas, for instance, who came from Chicago and signed with the A's briefly and played with them for a year. That could be an interesting challenge for you guys.
We're going to have Bruce some good examples with the guys that you're mentioning. Patrick Marlowe, Dan Boyle is another one where these guys have been with the Sharks organization for so many years, and just kids growing up and in the schools, etc. They knew going in that they were going to consider another team at this point in their career. They would be keeping their house, or in their case, building houses that would be here for the long term. And then the cities they were going to, and in Marlowe's case, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and Dan Boyle, of course, finished his career there with the Rangers. Those would be short-term rental situations on that end, and then area when they're finished.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. How many times do you see a situation where, especially if a guy thinks, I don't know how long I'm going to be with this new team, honey and kids, just kind of stay where you're at. I'm going to, go to the other state.
Play it by ear.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, and not to interject here something really quickly, though, but Ray Durham, who played with the Giants for about 4 or 5 years. And Ray, when he first moved out to the Bay Area, he was in his 30s by then. His family stayed back in, I think it was in Chicago or wherever they lived. And he was, after the game, you never could talk to Ray. We used to call him cell phone because he was always on the phone. I finally asked him, I said, Ray, I don't mean to pry and be rude, but you're always on the phone. What
they had cell phones back then?
Yeah, yeah. This is like a 2003.
Okay.
They were the much more modest version, 2003, 2004. And Ray said, well, I'm talking to my wife. I never see her. Move out here. Yeah. And I was just thinking, wow, that's got to be tough, the separation. And I think a pro athlete's wife probably, accepts that, but that doesn't make it any easier. So that's another part of your challenge, I would think, Sean, is trying to get the family moved as comfortably, as quickly, little trauma as possible, if that is possible.
Yeah. And Bruce, once again, you're bringing up a good example. Let's just play the card. Let's say Navarro Bowman would have considered a team back in the Midwest or the East Coast rather than picking the Raiders. That was pretty much public knowledge. The whole reason that made a lot of sense for him was just a simple route up 880 and have to drive a little bit farther to work rather than going cross country. And the kids, he made that black and white clear in the papers that the family had a lot to do with it, because had he made the leap to a team in the Midwest, like the Packers, for example, he would have absolutely been leaving the team, or that team, his family rather, at least behind for a bit to make sure he has the school piece figured out. You can't just yank your kids out of school right away. You have to kind of think that through, and that'd be the best move. And do I want to come back to the Bay Area once the bye week hits? That'll be my 1 week during the season. I get to kind of come back visit my family. So all those sort of things play factor.
It's interesting you talk about like the sticker shock, and I think about in the business world, you get these people from the Midwest who say, "Man, I just got a job paying $65,000 a year in the Bay Area," and that's
going to get you a 1-bedroom.
No, they can pitch a tent.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It is crazy. I mean, we forget here in the Bay Area just how 7 million people. This is I think the 6th largest market in the country. So that also, I would think, moving athletes here. Now, granted, they have a little more flexibility because most of them have some money, but still, I mean, the accommodations that are available, for instance, we know how difficult it is to find any kind of a place to live in San Francisco, let alone the outlying communities.
Well, not only that, but I'll bet you get a varying degree of people who are, athletes who are somewhat frugal.
Oh, yeah.
Versus the ones who are very free with their money.
Yeah.
Right, Sean?
The guys, if you use baseball, for example, the guys who are starting to work their way up. I mean, I remember the days dealing with a friend before he signed his big deal with the Giants, and just the budget, if you will.
Who was the player again? Sean, who was the player?
Brandon
Bell.
Brandon
Okay,
Bell.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he over the years, once the contract was signed, it's like a lot of these Giants guys, single family home neighborhoods, more that kind of neighborhood with the kids running around type of thing. These Giants players and their families, a lot of them have considered a lot of these various communities in the East Bay now. So anything from Orinda to Lafayette to Walnut Creek and beyond, they've really started to settle in there. They get a little bit more bang for their buck over there, but have a traditional single family home where you rather than trying to come in and squeeze your suburban into a type of condo sort of a property. You can park a couple cars in the driveway, the garage, got the nice backyard with kids and the dogs running around. So those are all considerations. Starting to see a lot more of those guys head over to the East Bay.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking the Giants, for a number of years when they moved into the new park, had some kind of agreement with local real estate, or maybe they owned some of the buildings, but they would accommodate their players with apartments and condos literally right across the street. I remember Felipe Alou, who, of course, doesn't have a family anymore. He was in his 60s. He had a nice apartment literally right across the street from the ballpark. So that was kind of an interesting situation. And I guess the single guys probably would love that kind of a
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, hey guys, we're going to cut to our second commercial break. Good stuff we're talking here. Second trivia question. Which pitcher set a dubious record in the 1980s when he became the first pitcher ever to lose 3 games in a best-of-7 World Series?
Yeah.
All right, that's our question. Email edward@sportsecon101.com the answer to that question. We'll see if you're the first caller with the correct answer. And don't touch that dial, because Sports Econ 101 will be right back. Great.
Okay.
Can you stay with us for one more segment?
Absolutely.
Oh, good. Okay.
Great, Sean. Appreciate
Thank
your
you. Yeah,
time.
this is really good. So, what's funny? You were referred by Mark Hahn of Pacific Private Money. And so, how do you guys know each other?
I think we're actually connected through LinkedIn and Facebook. I can't remember off the top of my head who was the one who directly connected us, but I think I've communicated with Mark mostly through LinkedIn over the years.
Well, LinkedIn is amazing. I don't take advantage of it, but anytime somebody asks me for a friendship request, I just go ahead and automatically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a good idea, because it's interesting. The people that, I'm working in broadcasting, naturally we get people in the communications industry, but I am surprised, because I'm in sports, that a lot of people are not into sports. They're not into broadcasting. They have nothing of interest, but they somehow have heard the name and they want to, have an association. It's in a way, it's kind of like Facebook, but it's obviously a lot more.
Yeah,
exactly. And at some point, we'll have you on the business show too, because it's really kind of interesting, the kind of stuff we're talking about. In fact, it's interesting that I've written a bunch of articles, gotten published in a bunch of magazines, and one of the ones that I literally took about 20 minutes beforehand, before our interview, one of Mark's employees emailed me. It's really interesting. One of the things Mark does is, someone wants to buy a house, but they haven't sold their current house yet, and they don't want to move twice.
Right.
But they can't qualify for 2 mortgages.
Right.
So what Mark's company does is help them buy the target house while they have time to sell the old house. Which I could think potentially could help, in Sean's case. So this guy wrote this, some realtor kind of came up with certain formulas. How it makes sense to borrow, at a higher rate and stuff. So it's really interesting. So I'm going to write an article giving credit for it, but just kind of reminded me of this relocation.
Yeah, you don't stand a chance in this market right now for kids to have their own.
Exactly. And sometimes you just have to come in with an all cash offer anyway, because that's what everyone's coming to.
Take those contingencies out of the equation.
Okay, here we go, guys. Sports Econ 101, one more time. I'm Edward Brown. I said that last time, one more time. So one more time again.
2 more times.
2 more times. Edward Brown here, along with Bruce.
Second time, third time. Whatever.
We'll eventually get to it.
We'll get there.
And our special guest, Sean Spanek. Second trivia question. Which pitcher set a dubious record in the 1980s when he became the first pitcher ever to lose 3 games in a best-of-7 World Series?
Now, again, I'm somebody who covered a lot of that.
1981.
1981?
1981.
Oh, it had to be somebody in the Yankees. Tommy John.
In fact,
Ron Guidry.
No.
I covered the 81 series. I only
remember this guy as a
relief pitcher?
No. Let's see.
Was he with the Yankees?
Yes, he was.
It had to be.
Yeah,
because the Yankees lost 4 games to 2. Yeah. Ed Figueroa. No.
George Frazier.
George Frazier. Yeah, no, he was a part of that rotation. The Yankees had a great run from about 76 through 81. Yeah. I think they won 5 divisional championships, 4 pennants, and 2 World Series. For a lot of that.
Yeah.
And Dave Winfield was there for the tail end of it, and you had Ron Guidry and Willie Randolph.
But this 81 was the year finally the Dodgers.
That was the strike year. That not half the season, but 2 months were wiped out, and the Dodgers won in 6 games. That was Fernando's rookie year.
Oh, that's right. 81. Yeah. I'm still upset about the '94 season though, so we won't.
Oh, that turned baseball fans off. Boy, I'll tell you. You remember '94, right, Sean? How frustrating that was if you were a baseball fan.
Matt Williams was on the record.
Oh, he was on the record, pace to break Babe Ruth. Yeah. Break Roger Maris, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Give Roger Maris, the late great Roger Maris. Come on.
So we're on the phone. We have Sean Spanek of SportsStarRelocation.com. It's a specialty firm that helps stars, athletes relocate.
And what's great about that title is it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah,
if you're an athlete, I would think you look at that. Oh, that's the guy I need to get in touch with.
Well, that's the thing is, how do they know you, except for maybe you've been in touch with the various agents?
That's the nice thing again about having teams that have national and various markets. These are realtors and brokers in all these cities, but it's kind of set up much like reps from any industry, where we're able to basically match local sports agencies, wealth firms, and of course the local teams, so that each person in their respective market can just basically walk through the front door of an office and sit down and have lunch or a formal business meeting or a cup of coffee or whatever the case may be, and get that FaceTime in and grow the relation that way. Because we always stress that we're national, all of our reps have their individual relationships. And when the person calls and says, hey, I know you guys are national, help in X, Y, Z city, we execute from there. So it's pretty easy.
You know, I think that the key nowadays, especially with the internet, is something like LinkedIn. And, you know, granted, word of mouth and face-to-face is great, but it is such a global world we live in where everybody is connected through the internet, that LinkedIn and all of these different apps, you know, they probably make your job a lot easier because you're able to connect with people you would never, 20 years ago, you'd never be in touch with, you wouldn't even know existed.
Absolutely. And we do use LinkedIn at times to get in touch with specific people. We also try to be pretty active at big events. I travel quite a bit. I was just in New York, had a chance to meet with this players team that York started, basically talks about, you know, athletes and their kind of off field during their playing careers, could be drug related issues they might have had while they were playing. Covers kind of a gamut of topics, if you will. Had a couple agencies, and of course his players tribune firm that I met with. Super Bowls, All-Star games I try to attend. Things like NFL, where you want to be at the senior bowl in Alabama, where you want to be at the combine, because in both of those sort of events, you're going to have the agents and the wealth advisors that are really taking the business seriously. They're out there doing it. So of course we want to stay.
I could think that the agents would just love you, but also, are there restrictions? Like a lot of times, you know, agents, there's a limitation as to when they can talk to players. But is there a limitation for you?
There really isn't. There are no guidelines or anything that's set up by the league dictating anything to us. I mean, it's basically us reaching out to them or them reaching out to us. There's nothing that, you know, we don't have any direct relationships with the league offices, so there's really nothing out of bounds for us in that regard.
I'm curious, I'd love you to personalize this a little bit. Can you give us a story about an athlete that was a particularly challenging move that you had to make? In the genesis of it, you know, how it started and how it finished, and obviously a happy finish if you can. About, you know, and somebody fairly well known, because I know you've done this a lot, but just to give the people listening an opportunity to kind of figure out exactly what you do and all the process you have to go through.
You're putting me on the spot.
I'm putting you on the spot. Is there one?
You're not going to have, you know, don't name the names, but
yeah, basically what I'm asking Sean to do is to tell us a story. If you feel comfortable doing that. If not, it's not a big deal. But I'm curious because I know a lot of our listeners, these athletes are just names, but they carry, you know, a lot of cachet. Some of these guys, these big names, and maybe this isn't a big name. Maybe this is just a regular journeyman guy.
I don't mean to repeat the earlier story.
No.
And the Derek Bledsoe example really is that's a great example of recent where again we're handling so many different pieces of that, and it needs to happen. So he is going to join the team right away. It's ideal for us to hear that he's going to join the team on the road. And in Eric's case, we find out that he wasn't going to be back in Milwaukee on Friday or Saturday for his next home game, in which case I had to school time before he would. I have a great story for you guys back from some of the San Francisco Giants years. Pat Burrell was a referral back in those World Series years to via Barry Zito. And I remember when Pat got the nod and he was going to be signing with the Giants, He was another example of a guy where I had a little bit of time finding his flat in Marina. He was joining the team in Cincinnati and basically told me, hey, I'm not too complicated, but I want to be something near Chestnut. And it's a fun little vibrant little pocket there if you can find me a flat and something decked out that's furnished. I'm going to be with the team in Cincy, but I'm going to be back there probably within the next 2-3 days. And when he got back into town in San Francisco, I had him a place that was completely decked out, furnished. Everything was dialed, and he was happy with the plan.
In the marina?
In the marina.
Wow. And that, now, for those that don't live in the Bay Area or live in Northern California, the marina is really one of the great places to live, one of the more expensive places to live. It's right along the San Francisco waterfront, overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge.
You gotta ask these guys what their budget is.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, money shouldn't be a major object, I would think, in this day and age, Sean, although a lot of these guys, as Evan was mentioning, come from modest circumstances.
Yeah, it is. In that case, I think it also depends on what the team is going to be actually picking up in the beginning. If there's a team absorbing the first in a rental scenario, the team, because of the trade happening so quickly, going to absorb maybe that first month, that might play a factor. In Pat's case, it was more about just having something that was ready to go, because he was pretty adamant he didn't want to be staying in a hotel when he got back to San Francisco. So much nicer and such more peace of mind when you can settle into a place that feels like home rather than going into the Marriott or something like that.
Well, and how do you decide? Like you said, it's all decked out. I mean, the taste in furniture, right?
Yeah. So we have a couple of furniture partners that we have out there, and what we'll do in the past year, I was able to send in a couple of different looks of what the furniture layout could look like. And it's kind of a package deal, if you will, and he was able to just kind of select what he was happy with.
Okay. And how do you, if you have a little personal question here, I mean, how do you charge for your services, or how do you guys make money?
Yeah, we basically have, if it's a rental or household goods or car transport, that sort of thing, they all have their individual fees. We have what we call a bundle package, so if you're going to need all of it, it's kind of all wrapped into one figure. And then, of course, the real estate transactions take care of themselves.
Yeah.
We're helping an athlete buy a property, for example, and as we know in the state of California and many of the states across the country, the seller pays all commission. So I'm going to know going in what my buyer's commission when athlete buy a home.
I was thinking one of the things, Sean, that probably helps you out, and again, not to knock these guys, because hey, look, we'd all love to be in their position in terms of the amount of money they're making. But it's not that money is no object, but it's not an impediment. In other words, you move to another city and you're not thinking, oh, geez, I got to shell out, a couple of $100,000 or whatever it is. They've got the money, so that makes it a little less stressful, I would think.
Yes, it does. And that, again, going back to that Bledsoe example, I mean, his wealth advisors, usually they're the ones that are kind of putting the squeeze on being careful because they're the advisors. They want to look like good guys. And
Sure.
Them being aware that this was happening so quickly, they said, hey, money really is no object at the moment when you guys know why. But we're not really talking about one of the more expensive markets in the country to begin with.
Yeah, Milwaukee is a nice town, but it really is a big, small town, and it's in the Midwest. So yeah, I would think you can get a lot of bang for your buck in a place like that.
Yeah. Also, in a situation like that where it happens so quickly, the most important thing is to make sure that the athlete is happy.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, he's got to.
Or the wife is happy.
Or the wife is happy.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's got to go and play ball. He doesn't want to be concerned about how much of the utility bills this month.
Yeah. No distractions. Always, yeah.
Sean, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. We'll definitely have to have you on again.
Great stuff, Sean. It's a
very
fascinating kind of career you've carved out for yourself here. I think you've really got a specialty going, and it sounds like you're moving along well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think the general public's always kind of fascinated and really kind of wonders how this all happens behind the scenes. So hopefully I can give them a kind of paint that picture, give them a snapshot of how it works behind the scenes when we move around it.
Oh, you certainly did. Yeah.
Well, you're mostly working with baseball, football, basketball, and hockey. Do you ever get any soccer stars?
We do. Actually, it's funny to bring that up. Ed Peterson, who's one of our partners down in Arizona, has been working quite a bit with the new MLS team down in Arizona. And we're pretty in with the MLS guys. We do work with a little bit of golf, European time to time. Then we've got some crossover naturally because our corporate office is down in Manhattan Beach, California. We get that crossover into a lot of your Hollywood and entertainment divisions and that sort of thing.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Again, Sean, thanks again for being our guest.
Appreciate it, guys.
Great talking to you, Sean. That was a great topic. It never occurred to me. What do these guys do when they move? I mean, the complications that can come up, because we all know. I mean, in my young career, I moved 6 times. But I was in my 20s. I was single. I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have to worry. I did it all on my own. But if you have a family and you have kids and you got a mother-in-law and you got cars and whatever, I mean, that's a lot of stuff to move.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about guys who are in the business world who travel a lot for business, but they always just come back to home.
Yeah. Well, and he also alluded to Hollywood and musicians. I mean, you think of the number of people. We're not just talking pro athletes. There's a lot of people in this boat that that are financially well endowed, but also do move around a lot.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to cut to our third commercial break.
Final
break. It goes fast.
It does. When you're having a good time, time goes fast.
Yes, it does.
It does.
But it's not going fast with 49ers, though. This season can't go fast enough.
Don't you feel sorry for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, the general manager? They inherited a mess down there. And not to take anything away from those players. They're trying their best, but not only are they beaten up, they just don't have a lot of talent.
And it's got to be hard to go into the next week and go, I mean, even if we win, we're still not going to make the playoffs. But I guess you got at some point you got to look at individually and go, you know what, I got to make sure that I am not cut from the team.
Well, that's that. The fans say, take the season, we'll get the first round draft pick. But a lot of these guys aren't going to be back next year. Athletes, they don't want to lose. They're thinking right now about a win. Kyle Shanahan doesn't want to go 0-16 in his rookie season.
Yeah, and then again for the individual players, they can't look bad, or else it's not good for next year. Okay, last trivia question. And again, we're talking 1980s.
I've struck out. I mean, I've taken 2 strikes already. Or swung and missed already. Yeah. So it's going to be strike 3 if I don't get this one.
Okay, which player became the first ever to hit 5 hits in a World Series game?
5 hits in a World Series game.
It happened in the 1980s.
Wow.
Do you need hints on that one?
Yeah, I do. I'm having a tough time today.
1925. No, I'm just kidding. It's because we're talking 1982.
1982. That would be Cardinals and the Brewers.
Brewers. That's right.
I think I know.
Okay, before the Brewers went to the
National League. That's right. They should still be in the American League, and Houston should still be in the
Exactly.
National League.
Okay, don't touch that dial. Sports Econ 101. We'll be right back with some closing comments.
You know why Milwaukee is in the National League, right? Bud Selig he grew up a Braves fan, huge Braves fan.
He decided to do that, really?
He asked for it. He wanted it. He didn't grow up. He was a young man, but he wanted Milwaukee to be in the National League because they were always in the National League with Henry Aaron was, And it's funny, they were only in Milwaukee from like 1950, it was 53 to 66, so 14 years. And then they moved to Atlanta. Yeah. That was a weird move. I remember that. It was unfortunate because for a couple of years there, they were one of the best teams in baseball. They had a huge following, late 50s. They went to the World Series and won it, beat the Yankees. They went to the World Series the next year and lost it. So, and they had Hank Aaron.
Who did they lose to?
They beat the Yankees in 57, lost to the Yankees in 58. And then they weren't contenders, but they were a good team in the 1960s. Most of the 60s.
Not the Atlanta Braves.
Atlanta division title in 69. They were a contender a few years. They had back in the early 60s and late 50s, they had Warren Spahn and Lou Burdett and Hank Aaron and Eddie Matthews. I mean, those 4 guys. 3 of those guys are in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. And Lou Burdett won 3 games in the World Series in the 57 World Series. So
he's not our question about the.
No. I think I had the answer, but I may be wrong. I'm going to give it a shot.
Okay, here we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Last time for today. Now this time it's the last time for today.
That's right.
I'm your host.
The last time for today, but not forever.
That's right. And my favorite co-host, Bruce McGowan.
Your only co-host, so I better be your favorite.
You are. Even if you weren't my only one, you'd still be my favorite.
Oh, you're too nice.
I am. Okay.
I'll give you the money after the show.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, last trivia question. Which player became the first ever to hit 5 hits in a World Series game? I'm surprised this took until the 1980s.
Well, you mentioned 1982, and that was the Cardinals in Milwaukee. And my old friend, and I call him my old friend because I've known him for a long time. I haven't been in touch with him for a little bit. But he played with the Giants. Bay Area native. East Bay native, and he was MVP of that series. I'm going to guess Willie McGee.
Now that's what I would have thought too.
The outfielder of the Cardinals, and I think he was a second-year player. Not Willie McGee. Vince Coleman?
No, it wasn't for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Oh, it was for Milwaukee.
Yes.
Gorman Thomas, Ben Ogilvie.
Who's probably the most famous one?
For the Milwaukee Brewers in '82.
But you know what?
Harvey's Wallbangers. That's what they call those guys.
That's right. Actually, you think of him more of a Twins player.
Oh,
Come on. Initials PM.
I'm still drawing a blank.
Paul
Molitor, who's now the manager of the Twins. Oh, and a great guy.
Yeah, he seems like a really good guy.
Man. He and Robin Young, I got to know them in
yeah.
spring training. Wonderful guys.
Okay. You know what we're going to cut out? Here's our thoughts for the day. Pain is temporary. Quitting lasts forever.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And
who said that?
Can't remember.
You said it.
It's
okay.
Amy Monimus. No,
oh.
I can't remember who said that. Okay, yeah. And beautiful things happen when you distance yourself from negativity. Ain't that
very true? Everybody can be cynical and down. It's very easy to do that. It's much harder to look for the positive.
And don't forget, 5% of what happens to you, 95% of how you react to it.
Good point.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, tune in next week to Sports Econ 101. We're going to be discussing sports topics from a business perspective and asking more sports trivia questions. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm your host, Edward Brown. We'll see you next week.
Good night, America.
So long.
Good show.
Yeah,
that was
good.
great. Yeah. I got to run because I got a cardiology appointment.
Oh.
I'm sorry.